Hello, dear students. I think you can remember we discussed about the physical properties of matter as the first part of the fourth unit. Today we are going to discuss about utilizing physical properties of matter. That means we are going to discuss about the usage or the applications of different physical properties of matter that we have learned. Earlier you have learned what matter is, and first here we'll consider how to classify matter based on its composition. So based on composition, matter can be basically divided into pure substances as well as non-pure substances. Non-pure substances are also known as mixtures. So in your day-to-day life, you have learned about so many types of mixtures and you are making use of these mixtures. Then, pure substances can further be divided into two types. Those are elements and compounds. So we are going to discuss about these terms in detail. And these elements can further be divided into two categories. Those are metals and non-metals. And the other type is non-metals. So we'll define those terms. After this, you are asked what pure substances are. Pure substances are the substances which contain only one component. Substances which contain only one component are known as pure substances. So here you can write matter that contains only one component. Then non-pure substances are matter that contains two or more components. Now we'll further clarify that. First we'll take pure substances. Pure substances have a constant composition. The composition is known and it is constant. For examples, we can say sugar is a pure substance. Pure water is an example for a pure substance. Salt is a pure substance. Copper, silver, copper sulfate, potassium permanganate, or what you call as Condis, these are examples for pure substances. Their composition is constant and they contain only one component and they have definite properties. So if we write the complete definition for a pure substance, you can say a substance having a constant composition. That means containing only one component with definite properties. Then we'll move on to the two types of pure substances as we have written earlier in the classification. First one is elements, second one compounds. So, what is an element? If I give certain examples for elements, when we say copper, iron, mercury, aluminium, gold, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, lead, zinc, mercury, chlorine, all these are examples for elements. Therefore, we can say an element is a pure substance with definite properties which cannot be further divided by chemical methods. An element is a pure substance and it has certain definite properties and it cannot be further divided by using chemical methods. So when we take the element gold, it has definite properties and it cannot be further divided by using chemical methods. So a particle of gold is having its own properties and those properties are common to the whole element gold, right? So then you are asked to write examples for elements. So by now there are about 120 elements that have been found out, identified, and many of them are given names, and in the coming grades you will be able to learn further about these elements and you will learn the chemical symbols of these and you will identify some of the elements are existing naturally and some of them are artificial. Likewise, you will learn about elements further. For the moment, you can say an element is a pure substance with definite properties and it cannot be further divided by either physical or chemical properties. So if I repeat the examples, you can write so many examples: nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, mercury, copper, gold, silver, mercury, aluminium, zinc, sulfur, iron, lead, chlorine. Likewise, these are few examples for elements. Then we'll move on to compounds. For example, first I will take an example for a compound. You all know that water is a compound. That means, though you don't know how to write the chemical formula of water by using symbols, you all know that it is written as, you have seen that it is written as H2O. So it means it is clear that hydrogen and oxygen are elements and water is a compound made out of the two elements hydrogen and oxygen. So it is clear that compounds are made out of elements. So we'll define a compound. A compound is a homogeneous pure substance in which two or more elements are chemically combined in a fixed ratio. I will repeat. A compound is a homogeneous pure substance in which two or more elements are chemically combined in a fixed ratio. So I think it is clear when we take the example of water. So there are two elements. They are chemically combined with each other in a particular ratio. Here, the ratio in between hydrogen and oxygen is 2:1. That is the definite ratio in between hydrogen and oxygen in the compound H2O or water. And what is this homogeneous? What is the meaning of homogeneous? Homogeneous means a mixture in which we can't separate the components, can't separately identify the components. Throughout the substance, the components are distributed in a uniform manner. For example, if we take a water sample, we can't separately identify hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms, and it forms a uniform substance. Therefore, we call it as a homogeneous substance. This will be further discussed in grade 9 and even after that about the term homogeneous. The properties of a compound are different from the properties of the elements that contributed to form that compound. Again, we'll move on to our example, water, H2O. Their hydrogen element has got different properties, and the element oxygen has got some other properties. But when these two are combined chemically to form H2O or water, water has another set of different characteristics. That is why here it says the properties of a compound are different from the properties of the elements that contributed to form that compound. I think it is clear. Then, as there is a vast possibility of combinations for the elements to form compounds, there are millions of compounds made of nearly 120 elements. So here, I told you so far the scientists have identified about 120 elements. So compounds are made by 2 or more elements. Therefore, there are so many methods by which these 120 elements can combine with each other to form different compounds. That is why there are several millions of compounds. So here you are asked to write about the elements present in different compounds. So here in most of the compounds, by looking at the name, you can write the elements present in that particular compound. At this level, you need to know the composition of a few compounds. First one, iron sulfide. As the name denotes, you can say the component elements are iron and sulfur. In some of the books you will find this sulfur as SULFUR. Then copper sulfate. As the name denotes, the component elements are copper and sulfur. Then sodium chloride. The elements are sodium and chlorine. Then sodium hydroxide. There sodium, hydrogen and oxygen are the component elements. Sodium, hydrogen and oxygen. Then calcium carbonate. They are the component elements. I will just tell you: calcium, carbon and oxygen. Calcium carbonate, the component elements are calcium, carbon and oxygen. Then in carbon dioxide, the component elements are carbon and oxygen. Carbon and oxygen. Then in water, we have already discussed hydrogen and oxygen are the component elements. Then magnesium oxide. The component elements are magnesium and oxygen. Magnesium hydroxide. The component elements are magnesium, hydrogen and oxygen. Then nitrogen dioxide, the component elements are nitrogen and oxygen. Then here you are given a simple exercise. There it says, categorize the following as elements and compounds. So there is sulfur, copper sulfate, chlorine, sodium chloride, zinc, iron, mercury, copper, glucose, carbon, aluminium, sodium hydroxide and hydrogen peroxide. If I name the elements present here, they are sulfur, chlorine, zinc, iron, mercury, copper, carbon, aluminium. And the compounds present here are copper sulfate, sodium chloride, glucose, sodium hydroxide and hydrogen peroxide. Then again you are asked about a different activity. There you are asked, what is the color of sulfur powder? So I think you all have seen sulfur. If I show it by using your textbook, here you are shown sulfur. Sulfur powder is yellow in color. And then you are asked what is the color of iron powder. Iron powder is grayish black. Gray, more or less gray, we call it as grayish black color. Then when these two are mixed, that means iron powder and sulfur powder are mixed together and the mixture is heated until this solid is melt. Then the observation is the formation of a black color solid. That black color solid is known as iron sulfide. So here also it is clear that iron sulfide is made out of the two elements sulfur and iron. And the properties of iron and properties of sulfur are no more there in iron sulfide. It is a new substance, that is why we call it as a compound. So I think I gave the answer for this. When you mix sulfur powder and iron powder and heat, what is your observation? It is clear. Then we'll move on to the next part. Various physical properties of matter. So far, you have learned about different physical properties. Now we are going to summarize those physical properties of matter. There are a number of physical properties in matter that help to identify and distinguish them. So the physical properties are the properties which are visible or which we can experience externally. Here you have to complete the given table. I have listed out so many physical properties and you will have to write about those physical properties. I and that means the meaning. The luster, or it is known as the metallic luster. The meaning is the shiny surface due to reflection of light falling on it. For example, if light is fallen on a metal sheet, then that light is reflected, and as a result of it we observe the surface of that metal sheet as a shiny surface. So the luster can be defined as the shiny surface due to reflection of light falling on it. Then the hardness. Hard substances. By experience you know what are the hard substances and what are the soft materials. So hardness is the ability of a material to resist wear and tear as well as scratching. Wear off and tear off and scratching. Once you make damage to that substance, the ability to make a damage to the surface. So hardness can be defined as the resistance of a material to wear off, tear and scratch. Then the brittleness. Brittle. You know the term. When we hit or crush a particular substance, if it is brittle, it will be broken into small particles. So brittleness can be defined as subjecting to breaking, crushing into pieces when a force is applied. For example, if we take a piece of dry clay, when you hit it or when you apply a force on it, it will be broken into small particles. So that is the brittleness. Then thermal conductivity. By the name, it is clear that it is the ability to conduct heat through a particular substance. Electrical conductivity is the ability to conduct electricity through a particular substance. Then the sonority. Now when you release a metallic substance, we'll say a metal lid on the ground, it will give out a sonorous sound. But if you put a glass on the ground, it does not give a sonorous sound. So it is clear the sonority, it is the emitting of a lasting sound when struck with an object. By experience you know what sonorous sound is. When you put a coin on the ground, again you can hear that sonority, sonorous sound. Then the color. It's clear that it is a visual quality of the substance. We'll say that sulfur is a yellow color, that is the visual quality. Then elasticity. Elasticity, you know elastics, when we apply a force, when we pull it, it will increase in its length, and once we remove the force, it will come to its original size. So the elasticity is the ability to stretch upon pulling and returning to the initial state when the force is released. Then the density. Later we are going to discuss about density in detail in the same unit. So for the moment I will say density is the mass of a unit volume. When we say take 1 liter of one substance and 1 liter of another substance, and when we measure the mass of these two substances, the more denser one will have a higher mass. That is the density mass of a unit volume. Then malleability, malleable. In grade 6 also you have learnt about these terms. Malleability is the ability to be hammered into sheets without breaking into pieces. So metals have got this property. When we hammer them, they are hammered into sheets without breaking. That is why we are able to make certain cutting equipments and other equipments by using metals. Then ductility. Ductility is the ability to drawn into a wire without breaking. Again, metals have this ductility. Smell, you know, it is the sensation caused in the nose due to the volatility of the substance. For example, if we open a cologne bottle, cologne is a volatile substance. Therefore, these particles get into the atmosphere and it makes a sensation in our nose. Then expansivity is the increase in volume without an increase in the mass upon increasing temperature. When we increase the temperature, the volume of a substance increases without change in its mass. For example, if we heat a metal, its dimensions are increased, but its mass is not increased. For example, if you can't remove the metallic lid from a glass bottle, what you do is you just heat up the lid. Then what will happen? The lid will be expanded and you can easily remove the lid from the glass bottle. Then the texture. Texture is what we feel. When we touch a particular substance, what we feel is known as the texture. Texture. Right. So it is the rough or smooth nature felt on touch. When we touch a sandpaper, we feel that it is rough. But when we touch a velvet cloth, we feel that it is smooth. That is the texture. The melting point or the melting temperature and the boiling point and boiling temperature, we are going to discuss about these in detail in the same unit. For the moment, I will say melting point is the temperature at which a substance turns from solid state to liquid state. You know, ice melts to form liquid water. So that is at a particular temperature. We are going to find it out in a coming activity. So melting temperature is the temperature at which a pure substance turns from its solid state to liquid state. Then the boiling temperature is the temperature at which a substance turns from liquid state to gaseous state. Liquid state to gaseous state. You know, once you boil water, that water is turned into water vapor at a particular temperature. Then that temperature becomes the boiling temperature of water. Right. Then we can take some of the physical properties of a substance to examine its purity. For example, we'll take the last physical property that we have discussed. So that is the boiling temperature. If water is mixed with other impurities, the boiling temperature of water will be changed. So if the boiling temperature is different, in a given sample of water, we can say that sample is not pure. That is why here it says some of the physical properties of a substance can be used to examine its purity. Right. Then we'll move on to density. So you have got an idea that density is the mass of a unit volume of a given substance. Mass of a unit volume of a given substance. We'll discuss a simple activity to learn about density. You are asked to put the following substances into a beaker with water. So the substances are piece of rigiform, piece of iron, a cork stopper, candle, piece of paper, stone, plant leaf, sand and coconut oil. So you are asked what are the substances that float on water. So by experience or you can do this and see piece of rigiform, a cork stopper, a plant leaf and coconut oil as well as a piece of paper will float on water. What are the substances that sink? So you can simply find the substances which will sink. If I repeat, the substances that float on water are piece of rigiform, a cork stopper, candle, and I think we missed candle in the previous explanation, piece of paper, plant leaf, and coconut oil. And the substances that sink are piece of iron, stone, and sand. Give reasons for your observations. So the reason is the substances that float on water have a low density than the density of water. Substances that sink in water have high densities than that of water. For example, sand has a high density than water, therefore it will sink in water. Piece of paper has a less density than water, therefore piece of paper will float on water. Then another activity. A group of students got a density bottle or a specific gravity bottle and put different types of water given below one after the other. After that, it is blot and weighed. The masses obtained were compared. So, you will be able to observe what this density bottle is. Right. Here you are shown the density bottle, or it is also known as the specific gravity bottle, and this is the triple beam balance. Triple beam balance which you use to measure the mass of a substance. Triple beam balance. Then you are asked what is distilled water. Distilled water is water which is free from dissolved solids. Dissolved salts, there is nothing dissolved in distilled water. So you can say water free from dissolved solids. So the types of water taken here are Distilled water, fresh water, you can obtain fresh water from a well. Then brackish water, which is taken from a lagoon, and hard water is available in certain areas of the country. In that hard water, the solubility of soap is less. Some and brine water. So these types of water are taken separately into the density bottle, and after that you can keep this on the triple beam balance. Before that you have to blot the bottle, because there may be water remaining on the surface of the density bottle. You have to remove that water by using a blotting paper or a paper serviette or something. Then after that you keep it on the triple beam balance, and you will be guided how to find the mass by using the triple beam balance. So here brine water is water which has a high concentration because of the solubility of lot of salts, right? Different types of water are available. So saline water is somewhat less concentrated than brine water. So here once you keep these different types of water, what do you think? Distilled water does not have any substances dissolved, and fresh water have little amount of minerals dissolved in it. Therefore, when we take a unit volume of these different types of water, when there are more substances dissolved in it, the mass of that 1 liter or the unit volume will be increased. So you can say your observation is distilled water. When we put distilled water into the density bottle, the mass is the lowest, and when we put brine water into the density bottle, the mass is the highest, and the mass increases in this order. Distilled water is the lowest, then fresh water, brackish water, hard water, and brine water. So you can say as the conclusion, distilled water is having the lowest density, while brine water is having the highest density. The ascending order of the densities is distilled water, fresh water, brackish water, hard water, and brine water. Observations and the conclusion. Then we will move on to the next physical property, melting point. You can define the term melting point. We already have defined it. It is the temperature at which a substance changes from its solid state to liquid state. How can you identify pure substances by using melting points? I think I already mentioned this by using the term boiling point. We'll take the example ice. You can find the melting temperature of ice, but when ice is mixed with another impurity, its melting temperature will be changed. As pure substances are having a fixed melting point, and if we know that fixed value, and if we are given another sample, and when we find the temperature of that sample, if it is different from the fixed value that we know, we can say that the particular substance is not pure. So here you can write a pure substance is having a fixed melting point. When a substance is mixed with impurities, its melting point changes. Therefore, we can find the purity of a substance by using the melting point. Then here this activity is to explain how to find the melting temperature of ice. The setup is given. Here there is a boiling tube, and you have put some ice chips into the boiling tube, and the thermometer is immersed. You can see the bulb of the thermometer is inside the ice chips, in between the ice chips, and you have immersed this boiling tube in a water bath, and that water bath is kept on a tripod stand on which there is a wire mesh, and you have held this boiling tube and the thermometer by using a stand, and you can apply heat by using a Bunsen burner. So what you have to do is make the setup in this manner and heat until these ice chips melt. So this stirrer is there to stir water in order to distribute the temperature throughout in a uniform manner. Then you can record the temperature against time. Then you will find that at a particular temperature, at a particular time, the temperature remains constant until all ice melts. So you can record that temperature, and you will find that value is 0 degrees Celsius. So though we provide heat constantly, at that melting temperature, the temperature in the thermometer will not change. It will remain at 0 degrees Celsius until all ice turns into liquid water. Therefore, we can say the melting point of pure water at normal atmospheric pressure is 0 degrees Celsius. 0 degrees Celsius. What is the melting point of ice at standard atmospheric pressure? That is 0 degrees Celsius. So here this, I have to write it like this. So here the atmospheric pressure is also important, because when the atmospheric pressure changes, the melting point of a substance will also be changed. What is the state conversion during melting of a substance? So the state conversion is solid into liquid. A solid will be changed into its liquid state. Solid is converted into its liquid state. We can write it in this manner. Solid is changed into its liquid state. So before moving on to the melting point, I will summarize. Melting point is the temperature at which a substance is turned from its solid state to liquid state. We discussed an activity to find the melting temperature of ice. There, once we continue applying heat, at a particular instance, the temperature will not be changed until all ice is converted into liquid water. That temperature is known as the melting point of ice, and it is 0 degrees Celsius. So the state conversion during melting is solid into liquid. Then we'll move on to the boiling point. Boiling point is the temperature at which a liquid turns into its gaseous state, and pure substances, as pure substances are having a constant boiling point, we can find whether a substance is pure or not pure. That means, for example, as I mentioned earlier, when water is mixed with impurities, its boiling temperature will be changed. Then you are asked to explain an activity to be done to find the boiling point of water. So here's the setup. Again, you can use a similar type of setup. Here this should be thermometer and R should come here. And you have put water into a boiling tube and you have kept it by using a stand, and the thermometer is there, and you can see the bulb of the thermometer is out of water because once we apply heat, water will be vaporized and water vapor will be formed, and we are going to find the temperature of that water vapor. So there, what you do is, when you apply heat, the temperature rises gradually. At a certain moment, the rise in temperature stops and water turns into the vapor state or the gaseous state from its liquid state. Then the temperature remains unchanged. Temperature remains unchanged till all water is vaporized. That particular temperature is known as the boiling point of water. So after that, you are asked, state 2 observations during the activity. You will observe that the water level decreases and the temperature reading of the thermometer increases and water vapor is formed, as well as another observation is that at a particular instance the thermometer reading will not be changed. It will be remained at a constant value for a while. Then what change of state occurs during boiling of water? You know, it is from liquid to gas, liquid to gas, or liquid to water, liquid water into water vapor. So the change of state is liquid into gas. When water boils, what happens to thermometer reading? Thermometer reading increases. What happens to the boiling point of water on a higher altitude? What is the reason for this? So, when we boil water at the top of a mountain, water will boil at a temperature below 100 degrees Celsius, which is the boiling point of water at standard atmospheric pressure. The reason is, when the surrounding pressure decreases, the boiling point decreases. When the altitude increases, the surrounding pressure decreases. When the altitude increases, the surrounding pressure or the atmospheric pressure decreases. When the atmospheric pressure decreases, the boiling point also decreases. So what happens to the boiling point of water on a high altitude? It decreases. The reason, when the altitude increases, the atmospheric pressure decreases. When atmospheric pressure decreases, the boiling point also decreases. Then you are asked to complete this table. Complete this table, physical property, and how we are going to test that particular physical property. Luster. So method of testing is scratching the surface of a substance with a knife and clean it with a sandpaper, and you can look at the so once you scratch the surface of a substance by using a sandpaper or a knife, if there is a shiny surface, you can say that it has a luster. Then sonority, I mentioned about this. By striking with a metal rod or dropping that particular substance on a cement floor, you can find whether it has a sonorous sound or not. Then the thermal conductivity. There is a particular activity. We will discuss about that activity. When you keep drops of candle wax on a rod made of different materials, and when you apply heat to one end of that rod, if the wax melts during conduction of heat, that particular substance has the thermal conductivity. It will be further explained by using an activity given below. And electrical conductivity also, we can make a circuit and we can put different substances in between a gap in that circuit, and by using that we can find the thermal conductivity. This will be further explained. And then the malleability. So to check the malleability, you can struck the material with a hammer after placing the substance on a thick surface, and if it turns into a sheet on hammering, then it is a malleable substance. And if that breaks into small pieces on hammering, or if it crumbles, it is a brittle substance. These are simple methods of testing these physical properties of different substances. So this is the setup which we can use to identify the thermal conductivity of a different substance. Here you have used different metal rods, and they are placed on a asbestos sheet or a plate of an insulator on a tripod stand. This is the tripod stand. And candle wax, which is symbolized by E. Candle wax is placed on these metal rods, and one end of each metal rod is heated by using a Bunsen burner. So A is the Bunsen burner, B are the metal rods, C is the asbestos sheet or plate of an insulator, D is the tripod stand, E is candle wax. And after doing this, the most thermal conducting substance The substance with the higher thermal conductivity will show the melting of wax drops on it first, and the one having least thermal conductivity will show the melting of drops of wax at the end. We have named the parts. What is the physical property tested here? Thermal conductivity. How are you going to make a decision on the above physical quantity? The metal rod in which the wax melts first has the highest thermal conductivity. The metal rod in which the wax melts last is having the lowest thermal conductivity. Then you are asked to draw a circuit to be used to test the electrical conductivity of different substances using circuit symbols. There I have used the same setup for another question. This is the setup. So you can use 1 or 2 dry cells and a bulb, a torch bulb, and these are connected by using connecting wires, and to these to this gap having these two ends A and B, you can connect 2 crocodile clips. So in between the crocodile clips you can connect the substance in which we are going to test the electrical conductivity. So the same setup is shown in your textbook, not by using circuit symbols. It is shown here. So these are the crocodile clips, and this is the bulb, and this is the dry cell. So you can keep the substance in which you are going to measure the electrical conductivity here, and if that particular substance conducts electricity, the bulb will glow. If the substance kept in between this gap AB does not conduct electricity, the bulb will not glow. Right. So this is the setup which is drawn by using circuit symbols. And we are here. Draw the setup using circuit symbols. What would be the observation if the substances conduct electricity? The bulb will glow. What are the two main groups to which, right, next one. What are the two main groups to which elements can be divided based on their properties? Elements can be divided into two main groups known as metals and nonmetals based on their properties. So you are asked to list out the properties of metals and nonmetals separately. So you can see the properties of metals and nonmetals here. This is in your textbook. Metals are good conductors of heat. They are good conductors of electricity. They are lustrous. They have a shiny surface. They make a sonorous sound. They can be hammered into sheets, or metals are malleable. They can be drawn into wires without breaking. Then that means metals are ductile. When we move on to nonmetals, they are poor conductors of electricity, except carbon. Carbon is a nonmetal, but a type of carbon which we call as graphite can conduct electricity. It is an exception. In addition to that, nonmetals are poor conductors of electricity. Nonmetals are not lustrous, you know that by experience, and nonmetals breaks into pieces when struck. That means these are brittle, and nonmetals are poor conductors of heat. These are poor conductors of heat. These are the properties of metals and nonmetals. Then you are asked to complete the table by putting a tick or a cross in this table. So here in the first column it mentions the substance, and then you have to say whether it has a luster, whether it is lustrous or not. So if I mention about this calcium, as it is a metal, it has a luster. Then sulfur, cross, copper, tick, iron, tick, graphite, cross, and magnesium, tick, because it is a metal. Then aluminium, tick, zinc, tick. Then we'll move on to the next property, that is sonority. Sonority. So calcium, tick, then sulfur, cross, copper, tick, iron, tick, graphite, cross, magnesium, tick, aluminium, tick, zinc, tick. Then thermal conductivity. Thermal conductivity, for calcium you can put a tick, sulfur, cross, copper, tick, iron, tick, graphite, cross, magnesium, tick, aluminium, tick, and zinc, tick. So though they have a thermal conductivity, that the ability to conduct heat will be varied depending on the substance. The next one is electrical conductivity. Electrical conductivity, calcium, okay, tick, sulfur, cross, copper, tick. Copper has a very good electrical conductivity. Iron, tick. Graphite, though it is a nonmetal, it can conduct electricity, therefore tick. And magnesium, tick, aluminium, tick, and zinc, tick. Again, I have to say the electrical conductivity changes depending on the material. Here we are just mentioning whether they have the ability or not. Then malleability, whether they can be hammered into sheets. Calcium, okay, sulfur, cross, copper, tick, iron, tick, graphite, cross, magnesium, aluminium, zinc, ticks. Then brittleness, out of the ones given, sulfur is a brittle substance, graphite is brittle up to a certain extent. That is how we are going to summarize the properties of the given elements. But remember, these properties can vary depending on the element. Here just we summarize the facts. Then a question is given, keep the following substances in between the gap AB one at a time. So to check the electrical conductivity of these substances, record your observations. You know, if the substance kept in this gap AB is a conductor of electricity, the bulb will glow. Record your observations. So you have to record your observations whether the bulb glows or does not glow. So the bulb will glow when you keep a piece of aluminium, zinc rod, copper wire a copper coin, gold ring, and iron nail. But the bulb will not glow when you keep a rubber band, a plastic lid, glass rod, piece of wood, piece of polythene. That's all. Rubber band, plastic lid, glass rod, piece of wood, piece of polythene. These are the substances that will not conduct electricity. Then you are asked to complete this table. So you can put a tick in the appropriate place. Calcium is a metal and it is a solid. Then when we take zinc, it is a solid, and it is a metal. Mercury is a metal, but it exists in liquid state. Sodium is a metal and it exists in solid state. Hydrogen is a non-metal and it exists as a gas. Then sulfur is a non-metal and it exists in solid state. Copper is a metal and it exists in solid state. Carbon is a non-metal and it exists in solid state. So, normally the metals exist in solid state at room temperature, but there is an exception, mercury, which is a metal. It exists as a liquid at room temperature. Argon is a non-metal and it exists as a gas. Phosphorus is a non-metal and it exists as a gas. Iodine is a non-metal and it exists as a liquid. Bromine, it is a non-metal and it exists as a liquid. If I repeat last two, iodine is a non-metal and it exists as a solid at room temperature. I think I made a mistake there. Iodine is a non-metal and it exists as a solid. Bromine is a non-metal and it exists as a liquid at room temperature. Then the last part is, again you are given a table and you are asked to complete that table. So you can make use of this table given in your textbook at the end of the lesson. So here our topic was utilizing the physical properties of substances or matter. So gold and silver are used to make jewelry because of the metallic luster mainly. Then hardness of steel and diamond is used in two different instances. Steel rails are used to withstand weight and diamond as the substance with the highest density and the hardest substance in the world, it is used to cut glass. Compressibility of oxygen and LP gas is used to store those in gas cylinders. So we have discussed about this compressibility at the first part of this lesson. Then the order of LP gas is used to detect gas leakages. When there is a gas leakage, we know that. If we don't know that, it will cause a huge accident. Then spreading the scent. is the application of these particular substances, perfumes and sweet smelling smoke. And thermal conductivity of aluminium is used to make cooking pans, and lead, the thermal conductivity is used for soldering purposes. You also may have used lead rods in order to solder or melt and connect two different metals. You can connect iron rods by using this soldering method of lead due to the high thermal conductivity of it. When you are making this different circuits, electrical circuits, electronic circuits, you make use of this soldering property of lead. Electrical conductivity of copper and aluminium is used to conduct electricity. Elasticity of rubber balloons is used for decorations. Expansivity of mercury and alcohol are used in measuring temperature by using these thermometers. Once the temperature increases, the mercury column or the alcohol column rises. That is because of this expansivity. Then electrical appliances with bimetallic strips like electric iron, because of the expansion of solids, the automatic electrostats function. You have seen when the temperature of the electric iron increases up to a certain extent, the circuit automatically gets disconnected because of the presence of this bimetallic strip. It avoids the overheating of the surface of the iron. Then brittleness of chemical compounds, cereals, granite and eggshells are used in breaking them into smaller pieces. Large pieces are broken into smaller pieces because of this brittleness. There are certain chemical compounds and like calcium carbonate and cereals which we make use for food industry, granite which is used as a lubricant, and eggshells. These are brittle substances. The smooth texture of talc, which is a mineral, is used to make talcum powder which is applied on the body, and rough texture of sandpapers are used to smoothen the surfaces of wood and boards. So these are the practical applications. Now we have learnt about the physical properties of different substances, as well as we can make use of these physical properties by knowing about them properly. So I think you have gained an idea about the different physical properties and what are the instances in which we make use of these difficult and different properties of substances. So that's the end of the lesson. Hope